There's a really good video recently on Valuetainment with Dorian Yates, and they're talking about how Flex never seen Dorian as beatable. Now, that's actually taken out of context. As far as the politics of bodybuilding is concerned, that's certainly true, but from a competitive aspect, it actually wasn't the case, and I'm going to show you some proof in this video and explain exactly what was going on there.
I remember Flex Wheeler once said, he says, I never saw Dorian as beatable.
So bodybuilding in itself is an interesting thing. I mean, there's some people that consider it a sport. You know, it's definitely a competition. It's kind of more like a beauty pageant, to be honest. There's subjectivity involved. In sports, you pretty much know if somebody won or lost. I mean, this is even... The bodybuilding is even worse than a UFC fight because there's subjectivity involved as well. When you see scorecards, you know, maybe 2 of the 3 judges seeing the fight would be considered the right way, whereas that 3rd judge, the way he scored the fight doesn't even look like he was watching the same fight. So bodybuilding even takes that aspect to a larger extreme, because in the eye of the judge, who's to really say who looks better at the end of the day? Now, there are certain things to keep in mind. You know, body aside, sometimes it's obvious when you could look at the conditioning of a bodybuilder, the size, the symmetry, etc. But when it comes down to posing routine, I think that's a little easier to judge. And even something like that, the beauty of Flex's posing, they still gave Dorian the nod there. I mean, that's just something that, you know, at a certain point, you just can't win due to the not just the subjectivity, but the politics of bodybuilding. Going further into that, you gotta bear in mind that what makes the Mr. Olympia so special, it kind of ties back into what makes anything so special, and that has to do with the rarity of it. You know, if something's valuable, there's just less of it to begin with. Think about gold, for example, compared to sand at the beach. Gold is valuable because it's rare. So Mr. Olympia, there's a good reason why you don't have a new Mr. Olympia every year. Now, obviously, sometimes you'll have a champion that's dominant for a really good reason, and then other times, not so much. And there are examples in the history of the Mr. Olympia where that certainly has been the case. So, again, kind of tying back into that, that's why it's not uncommon to see a Mr. Olympia reign for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, etc. In fact, any new competitor in the Olympia, they're just not going to win if it's their first Olympia competition, even if they deserve to win. In fact, in 1993, I think Flex actually did deserve to win, but he got second, which is great. The tragic thing is he was unable to compete the following year, 1994, due to a car accident. And that's really the year that what I consider when they would have let him win. Deserving or not, it would have been possible to win in that year, in my opinion. Now, I'm going to actually do a full Mr. Olympia video in the future, but just to break it down, the first competition was in 1965, and up until just recently, 2019, the Olympia has been around for 55 years, and in that time, there have literally only been 15 champions. So, if you break down the math, the average champion would have reigned 3.6 years, and there should have actually, in my opinion, been less than 15 champions. It was the early 80s where bodybuilding was in an interesting direction where it really didn't know where it wanted to go, and you'd have a different Olympia champion every year in the early 80s. Now, when Arnold came back in 1980...
I'll be back.
You know, everybody loves Arnold. I don't necessarily think he deserved to win if you just go by a bodybuilding perspective, but he's Arnold, so yeah, you gotta kind of give him the win. And again, that's where the politics come into play. So, Mr. Olympias who've actually lost: Sergio Oliva in 1970 lost to Arnold. Samir lost in 1984 after winning in 1983. Ronnie Coleman lost in 2006. Jay Cutler lost in 2008 to Dexter Jackson. Of course, Phil Heath lost in 2018 to Sean Roden. But all the other reasons why the reigning Mr. Olympia did not continue to win is usually he retired or just did not compete for various reasons. For example, Franco Colombo in 1976, the reason why he didn't win in 1977 is because he had a horrible injury and couldn't actually compete in 77. He didn't compete in 78 or 79 either, or 80, but he would be back in 1981, and again, this controversy comes into play as far as him winning in 81. But you see a common theme here. You know, the Mr. Olympia reigns for a certain duration of time. I mean, look at Yates near the end of his career. He's still getting perfect scores on symmetry after an injury when he basically didn't even have a bicep left in one of his arms.
He was winning with a perfect score, and I was a little still younger than this, but Kevin Levrone and Sean Ray were more aware and vocal. It's like, listen, okay, if you're winning with a perfect score and you have no injuries, and then you have a injury that you can see, that's not perfect anymore. And then we have another torn muscle, how is that still perfect? So as me and Kevin and Sean were kind of more, I guess, pleasing to watch pose, you know, we're better expressionists of ourselves or whatever. We knew that he wasn't. So how can you beat us in posing when you're not noted to be a better poser than us? And we look at the score at the end of the day, it's 5.555. That's perfect. I'm like, wow. So honest, for me, I just didn't say nothing. I'd always just say, hey, listen, man, you know what? I'm going for second. I'm trying to hold everybody else off. That was my way of saying, I know it's going to happen. I just can't do anything about it. And me and Dorian got along great, other than Sean Ray and Dorian, and Kevin and Dorian didn't get along at all. So I didn't really want to be disrespectful for something that this man had no control over. If they're allowing things to happen, why am I going to go and shit on his parade? That's not cool. You know, that's not respectful. You know, so I would just try to take it to him on stage. I'm trying to beat him, but I understood what was going to happen.
So taking that into consideration, if bodybuilding was, I don't know if I want so much use the word fair, or let's just say completely subjective, you can't score somebody with perfect symmetry if, in fact, after an injury, they no longer have perfect symmetry. So how could they get the same exact score prior to the injury and then after the injury? They wanted Mr. Olympia to remain Dorian Yates. And don't get me wrong, Dorian Yates was a great Mr. Olympia. He came in, brought a new era size, had granite-like conditioning. So he deserved to win a lot of these years, but I don't necessarily think he deserved to win all these years, especially in 97 when he would actually outbeat Nasser, who came in second place, who had definitely far superior look, conditioning, and everything else. So anyway, that's what Flex Wheeler really meant when he said he felt that Dorian was unbeatable. Context is really important anytime you read a quote or hear a quote from somebody. So hopefully that sheds a little more light on everything. But anyway, let me know in the comments section, do you think he could have actually legitimately beat Dorian Yates during Dorian's era? Or could Sean Ray or Nasser El-Sonbaty, even Kevin Levrone beaten Dorian Yates? Or was it really just politics involved that Dorian had such a long run? With that said, my own personal opinion, I certainly do think Dorian deserved to win several of those Mr. Olympia titles, but maybe not necessarily every single one that he did win. Anyway, let me know in the comments section. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up, and I'll be sure to do more of these bodybuilding type videos in the future. Thanks for watching.